Oscar Piastri right behind him, Lando behind him, two McLarens, the two best cars in Formula One, right behind you at Imola. I still thought there was no way he was going to win that race. I can't believe that he managed to drive as well as he did in that last phase and set fastest lap. If you wanted to really focus on Freddie Vasseur, one, he failed to secure Adrian Newey. Two, he approved the sacking of Carlos Sainz and the replacing of Lewis Hamilton. And three, the team is rubbish this year, basically. And so, there's two big things that, as a team principal, he could have done. He could have got Adrian, and he could have kept Carlos Sainz. And he didn't do either. So, okay, we went with his options. But so far, it ain't working.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the F1 Hour. With me as always, my friend and yours, the goatiest of all F1 minds to have ever goated, the one that they call Mr. Peter D. Windsor. How are you doing, good sir?
Well, after a race like that, I'm doing really well. Cameron up and early this morning, out walking Dexter, and just never felt better. What a weekend, really. The Rally of Portugal, the Grand Prix, obviously, Indy qualifying, so much going on. And the PGA, of course, I lost all my money in the PGA. Jordan Spieth, Matt Fitzpatrick, where were you when we needed you? Anyway,
Go on, Mr. Windsor. As is customary, from the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix this weekend past, what do you think was the biggest story to come out of?
That overtake of Max into turn one. It was one of the best passes I've ever seen. And I'm not exaggerating. I think, obviously, every pass is different because they're related to the stage of the race, the condition of the cars, the driver that's being overtaken, the driver that's doing the overtaking, the difference between the cars, what stage of the race it is. So many factors come into play. But how many young kids begin their motor racing career going to some sort of racing school, and it's hammered into them, you cannot win the race in the first corner. Well, guess what? You can. And that's where he won that race. And it was just outstanding. Talk about opportunism. And this to the context of all the argy-bargy we've had into first corners anyway, if you think of Saudi Arabia and Miami. You would think, any normal human being, I think, in that situation that Max was in, would think, well, dirty side of the grid, blown away by Oscar and George, better just give him the best, better not cause any trouble, might get a reprimand, whatever, everyone will be on my back again. But that didn't even enter his head. And that's the beauty of Max, of course. He doesn't listen to all that white noise around him. He just focuses 100% on laser beam on being a racing driver and being aware of everything around him. And I've often, I think a lot of people say, what would he know about it? But I've often said, I think Jackie Stewart knows exactly what he's talking about when he describes what you need to be doing before the start of a Grand Prix. And it isn't reflex tests for the eyes. It isn't this. It isn't coordination stuff. It's being very calm, deflating the emotions out of your mind so that your body is completely ready to be responsive to whatever's going around and isn't expecting anything. It's reacting rather than expecting. The difference actually from driving a racing car in terms of managing the dynamic weight. That's exactly what Max did. He was just super calm, saw that thing. What is Oscar doing? Bang, straight down the outside. And you've got to think about the judgment as well. And the fact that probably the Red Bull isn't quite as good as getting its tires up to temperature as the McLarens, or maybe even the Mercedes. So there was the risk also that he didn't have full tire temperature going into that. And yet there was a diminishing gap that he sized up to within a millimeter dynamically and did it perfectly, absolutely perfectly. And we know it was perfect because Oscar didn't have time to react, didn't have time to do anything. He was just, whoa, what's that? And then the Red Bull was gone. End of story. And because it was the softer of the range of Pirellis, I think that was an incredibly important part of the day, because then it meant that Max could basically control the heat build up on the tires with nothing in front of him in clear air. And Oscar was always going to have to, breathe Honda fumes. And that was never going to be easy, even for a McLaren driver. I think they made a mistake in bringing him in early. I think they over-strategized. I think it was a classic example of too many strategy people, looking at it from an analytical, digital point of view rather than sucking what's going on out there. Yeah, we have got a better car. This cannot go on. Something will happen, whether it's a safety car or something. We'll stay out there. If Max thinks he can do a one-stopper, we'll do it as well. That's what I think they should have done. That would have been the sort of old school philosophy. But because we live in 2025, digital, got to have all these strategy engineers around. Bang, oh yeah, looks like we got to do this. Tires are getting too hot. And it was too black and white, and they over-strategized, in my opinion, and brought him in, and that kind of cost him the race. I know it was multiplied by the VSC and then the safety car, but at the end of the day, I think it was the wrong call. And as for Max, it's all very well to say that he benefited from the VSC, which of course he did, but then, he didn't benefit from the safety car because all the hard work had disappeared the minute the field was bunched up again. And Oscar Piastri right behind him, Lando behind him, two McLarens, the two best cars in Formula One, right behind you at Imola. I still thought there was no way he was going to win that race. I can't believe that he managed to drive as well as he did in that last phase and set fastest lap. It was just an outstanding performance of a driver beating the best cars, and that that's what you think about when you talk about Fangio at the Nürburgring in 57, for example. The Ferraris were quicker. They had more power. He was in the Maserati 250F. And he just thought his way through of how a racing driver on a circuit like that could beat the two Ferraris. And I think, I don't think Max thought about that very much. He just went out and did it. But that's what he achieved. Sterling Moss, same thing. 61 Monaco, 61 Nürburgring, same thing. Underpowered Lotus climax against the Ferraris. And show Max any sort of circuit where it's not that the corners are massively dramatic. It's just that it's a narrow ribbon at Imola. So many things can happen, as we saw from quite a lot of the rookies. You've got to be very, very accurate in everything you do. And accuracy comes from the way Max drives, which is very supple, very soft inputs, driving into the rotation point with the front of the car, which allows him then to play with some variables as he's going in, and then not doing anything until he's got the car perfectly straight and just accelerating out of the corner, looking after the rear tires. And if you drive any other way, late braking, wider turn in, get on the power as soon as possible, you're going to run into trouble. And with Oscar, that happened with overheating tires. And with Lando, it was, we saw that in qualifying. You just can't drive that way consistently around a circuit like Imola. Some circuits these days, you probably can get away with it, but not Imola. And that's where, and although there aren't many places where you can say, oh, Max had shorter corners, it was the sensitivity of touch that enables him to be a short corner driver that we saw on display yesterday. And that was just sublime.
Go on then, Mr. Windsor. Let's double click on that turn one overtake, because I remember Martin Brundle saying once upon a time that the difference between the very good and the very great, as far as Ayrton Senna, is that Ayrton would get to a turn and he'd know the longitude and latitude of the grip, as well the extent of it, before we even got to the turn, and Martin Brundle and the rest would have to get there and then work it out in real time. Is that what we saw from Maximilian Verstappen as versus Oscar Piastri going into turn one? That Oscar was trying to do a calc in real time, but Max, on a full tank of fuel on the medium compound tyres, got to the turn and knew exactly where the grip was and how much there was of it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the feel. I keep using this phrase, surface of the road, feeling the surface of the road. And that's what Max has. And as I say, his tires weren't up to temperature, no way. And yet he could feel exactly how much grip he had. Now, it's easy to say that because in Miami, he locked up. So he's not perfect by any means. It's just that the surface, I think, at Imola, and the fact that the tires were softer in general, enabled him to have a little bit more feel of what he was doing. I don't think in Oscar's case it was just lack of feel and he doesn't have the same ability to do that. I think in Oscar's case it was just a kind of natural, well, I'm on the pole, I've won the start, this is my corner, no way anybody's going to pass me on the outside, bang, ooh, what's that? I think it was just more, I think I used the word relaxed in my video. It's probably not appropriate to say he was relaxed, but I think he was a little bit, oh, well, done the start, first corner's done now, just focus on a good exit. That's kind of what he was doing. And yeah, that's not. I mean, George Russell behind was obviously wound up. And if you look at the telemetry, George is having to feather the throttle behind Oscar. So Oscar's kind of vacillating a little bit. And he does his usual thing now of coming out of the throttle before he brakes. Race engineers out there who doubt that that's feasible, take note, because that's exactly what he did. Whereas George is, when he's not accelerating, he's braking, and as was Max. Max is coming out of the throttle, applying the brakes into turn one on that first corner was absolutely perfect. Not a millisecond of overlap, just perfect. But Oscar was out of the throttle on the brakes, and it was all a little bit leisurely. And there is a point where Max is still basically on full throttle and Oscar's out of the throttle, and there's a 30-kilometer-hour difference between the two, with Max on the outside. You can almost say, well, at that point, he had no option but just to do what he did, because it was a massive speed differential.
Insane, Peter. But you describe the parameters, the eventualities even that would happen under normal circumstances. I think F1 noobs, the Drive to Survive generation, will look at that and not understand that 99 times out of 100, when he takes him at speed through Barriente, Tamburello, that you're either going to lock up a wheel or not be able to keep it on the island. Something else would happen taking that much speed as versus an Oscar Piastri, 9 times out of 10, Peter.
Well, I don't think any other driver could have pulled that off, actually. Wow. And I think it's only because Max has that feel that he was able to do that. And he wasn't in trouble at all with the car at any stage. There was no moment when he had understeer or the car was doing something a bit weird mid-corner. It was all absolutely as he knew it was going to be. Total harmony with the surface of the road and and in terms of what the dynamic weights were of the car at that point. So yeah, whether that's something that young drivers should aspire to and try and copy or not, it's difficult to say. But if you've got Max Verstappen's inbuilt God-given talent, yeah, absolutely. But you've got to have that. I mean, the guy is just superhuman, I think, in that. Well, he's getting better all the time. That's another point, isn't it? And I did say, I think, in one of our chats earlier this year, that one of the great things about 2025 is going to be watching Max in an inferior car when the Red Bull isn't blitzing everything. It's obviously a relatively difficult car to set up. When they've got a sweet spot, it's not bad. It's still a pretty narrow sweet spot, still uses its tires more than the McLaren Mercedes. It's still not the best car out there. And yet it's elevating Max's talent. Well, it's not elevating it, it's putting it on display in a way that we wouldn't normally see if he was in the best car. Yeah. That's what's so great about it. It's like watching a great golfer when he's not playing that well and having to hit a lot of balls out of the rough. Then you really see how good he is. Yeah. As distinct from just whacking it on the fairway. And it's the same thing with Max. We're seeing him, what does he do when he's on P2 on the dirty side of the grid in Imola? How does he transform that into a race win? We haven't been seeing that much since 2022. Yeah. Because he's had such a good car.
No, he's being the difference, isn't he? The difference maker, as they say. And I'd argue, Peter, that it's...
he is the difference. I mean, look, where was Yuki Tsunoda all weekend,
100%, Peter, you're absolutely on the money. And I'd argue that at this point, he's making the impossible almost seem routine. It's not the first time that I've seen a manoeuvre like that. I'm reminded of 2021 Mexico Grand Prix when he does a very similar thing around the outside of Bottas, and Lewis Hamilton a couple of years ago, similar story in the wet around the outside of Charles Leclerc into turn one. He just kind of he just does it. He just does it. And they'll say, "Oh, stop Max glazing, Cameron. You're giving him too much praise." But I've been watching F1 a long time, Peter, and I'm not sure that I've ever seen somebody do these impossible things so frequently. No, it's crazy.
Well, that's right. And it's not something, as I say, it's not something that he thinks about very much. He just does it. It's pure instinct. And that's what's so nice to see. It's just pure natural talent on display. Yeah. Widescreen Technicolor. It is just beautiful to watch. Somebody that good driving a car that well.
What a time to be an F1 fan, Peter. Although saying that, to play balance games, do you think, as far as causation, do you think Oscar Piastri has to take some responsibility for, as you said, being a tad too relaxed into turn one and anticipating that Max Verstappen was obviously going to put a wheel up the outside of him?
No, I don't actually. I think given where he is with the World Championship, given the results he's had this year already, given the importance of finishing every race, I think his approach to turn one was probably correct, given the way he drives the car anyway. So, yeah, I'm not critical of Oscar there. I would be more critical of his feeling that he needed to go to a two-stop strategy quite early in the race and sort of spoon-feeding the strategy engineers at McLaren into agreeing with him, rather than thinking, no, I'm going to stay with this. I'm going to beat this guy. I don't think that was foremost in his mind, because he's won a lot of races already and he's leading the championship. It's a different thing in that situation. I mean, if it was reversed and Max was in the McLaren and Oscar was driving the Red Bull, I'm sure Max would have just stayed out there and, raced this guy and beaten him. Given the situation Oscar's in, I don't think it was surprising that Max did that to him, to be honest. I think more of a surprise for me, and it was a pleasant surprise, was that he didn't let Lando pass at the restart after the safety car. I thought he would do that because there wasn't a lot of downside for him to do that. It was unlikely. He could have taken the race to Max, but it was unlikely. It was 11 laps difference in the tyre wear. And Max was obviously in a position to pull out a little bit of lead at the restart anyway, as you can when you gun it out of Rabazza. And I just thought, he'll score a lot of points with the team now by letting Lando pass immediately and then following Lando and see what happens and letting Lando do it. And there was quite a lot of upside in doing that, because if Lando then didn't win the race, it would have hurt Lando even more. And equally, it would have scored a lot of points with the team. As I say, there was no downside really in Oscar doing that. But then, as I say, I was pleasantly surprised, because he just stayed there and he's actually pretty quick. He did a pretty good job, and it took Lando, 3 laps to get past him, which was, a bit of an indictment for Lando, I suppose. And equally, it says a lot about Oscar's fire in his belly, and that's good. But by the time Lando got him, it was job was done by Max, wasn't it?
Yeah, agreed.
So I think that was an interesting little cameo of where Oscar's at. He isn't going to take any prisoners, I don't think.
No, he's very clearly looking to win himself a championship of the driver's variety, methinks, Peter. That's the goal from 25 now.
Yeah, I agree. Obviously he is. But I mean, McLaren is a different team to Red Bull when Max was winning championships. It's a different team to Ferrari when they're winning championships. McLaren is like one big happy family, all glad, happy, aren't we wonderful, and everything's terrific, and everything's on display, and we're all having to get on, we're all good friends, all that stuff. And so therefore, it's probably more important for Oscar to feel that there's harmony within the team on both sides of the garage than it is for, say, Alonso when he's winning world championships at Renault, when he doesn't care at all as in the other car, or even Max for that matter, or Michael. So in a way, it's slightly different. He's got to be a race driver true to himself, and he's got to have that true grit, that Aussie grit. But at the same time, he has to try to keep this sort of, as I say, glad, happy McLaren atmosphere of everybody rah, rah, rah,
Do you think McLaren made a mistake, Peter? Again, at the altar of optimising for Oscar Piastri's chances of winning a Drivers' Championship. Do you think the call should have come to Lando to hold station, fella?
No, not at all. No, Lando was on the new tyres, so why would you do that at this stage of the year? No. Lando was obviously, he got on the radio and started wittering about, I don't really want anyone to make a decision, but, just to remind you guys, if I'm going to have a go, I've got on the new tyres. It was all sort of, didn't make any sense at all. It would have been better if he'd done a Charles Leclerc and just said, when is he going to let me pass? What lap? Or something like that, a little bit more definite. So it was ringing in the ears of the engineers. But Lando was waffling at that point, wasn't he? And no, I don't think they missed a trick there. I think again, I keep talking about Zach's master plan, and it's kind of falling into place at the moment because they didn't need to do anything really. It just took care of itself.
What do you make, Peter, of this tyre degradation, Larky? Because it feels like McLaren's advantage has been rooted season to date in the fact that their tyres almost reverse deg, that they manage their tyres much better than the other 9 teams on the grid. And all of a sudden now it feels like Red Bull have bought a series of upgrades, a brand new edging cover, fairing around the suspension, and maybe most pertinently, brake ducts, inlets and outlets. And all of a sudden, Max isn't complaining about problems with the brakes, and he's definitely, more pertinently, not complaining about tyre deg in the latter stage of the stint. 21 laps was what was advised by Pirelli on those mediums, and he went for nearly 30 without a peep. What's going on there, Peter? Have Red Bull made a step as far as their upgrades that they brought to Imola?
Yeah, undoubtedly, Red Bull have made a step. and nothing unusual there. Red Bull do make steps. Ferrari, in theory, should make steps. Mercedes have made steps. Other teams are. Aston Martin have. So that's going on all the time. I think this is more to do with the sensitivity of the Pirellis in dirty air. And if you're a McLaren and you're starting from the front row of the grid, the odds are you're going to be in relatively clean air, even if you're P2 and you're Lando Norris, because you can drop back to a point where you can look after the tyres. As I said at the beginning, I think that's exactly where Max won this race, because he then had clean air and he was able to manage the temperatures of the tyres much more efficiently. So I think this whole thing of how you manage the tyres is getting a bit overrated and out of control, because the reality is that McLaren have a quicker car in qualifying over one lap. And that's nothing to do with time management. You could say, oh, well, sector 3, but sector 3, Max has been very good on sector 3s at most circuits. So it's not a question of managing the temperatures over the lap any more than it is for any other team, for McLaren versus the rest. They just have more downforce, more efficient downforce at the moment. That's what it's all about. Now, Red Bull are making some steps in that direction for sure. But we'll see more at the Spanish Grand Prix, when the front wing regulations come into play. I think people are taking a lot of this sort of data and extrapolating it into a time management syndrome, and I don't necessarily think it's as significant as that. I think it's more, if you qualify at the front, you've got a much better chance of managing the tyres. There's nothing complicated in Formula One, or indeed in motor racing in general, and that's a classic example of overcomplicating something.
Do you think then, Peter, with that in mind, that this is a qualifying championship per se, do you think Red Bull made a mistake by not, as Max Verstappen advised, allowing him to qualify on a set of mediums, the C5 instead of the C6?
No, I don't. Well, I mean, on the day, maybe you could argue, but I don't think it is a qualifying championship. Yeah, for sure it is. For the reason I've just said, if you're qualifying always at the front, by definition, you've got a very good car with a lot of downforce, and B, you don't have the problem with dirty air. So yes, of course, every race is a qualifying race in that respect. Monaco next weekend, even more so, obviously. But yeah, there was a little bit of a question mark about the C5 v the C6. But at the end of the day, I think Max did a brilliant job on that red tyre. I don't think he would have done that time on a medium. No way.
Oof. I thought a lot of people were saying that the mediums were potentially worth a tenth or two quicker, but the argument was that you would lose potentially a tenth or two more in the race by running on scrubs or starting the race on scrubs mediums off the line. So I suppose it's
they may say that. A lot of that might have been blindsiding the opposition. I don't believe that. I think the red tyre was still, for one lap, was still quicker than the medium.
Yeah.
All the evidence we saw. Fair. Up and down the grid.
Go on then,
I know that. I mean, the Alpines were good on the medium on Friday, but the track was very different on Friday.
Yeah, true. I suppose,
and we know that Sorry to interrupt, but we know that how good Max was on the mediums in FP3. But it was a big ask to put him on mediums in qualifying. I don't think. I don't think that was on, to be honest.
Not buying it. I suppose
it might be on at Monaco, where you want to be out for as long as you can just to get in a free lap, but that's a different story.
Yeah, fair shout. I think it's because of the Aston Martin over performance, right? As soon as they put on mediums, all of a sudden they're in the top 10 when nobody expected them to be, but it's always going to be 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, right, as far as the risk.
Yeah, and you can't relate what's happening at Aston to what's going on at Red Bull or McLaren at all. They've got a completely different car, and we've seen that through the ages, that a car that's quite difficult, you suddenly put on a slower tyre and it goes quite well because it's got a better balance. And yeah, that happens, but you can't relate the two at all, I don't think, one team to another.
Not apples and apples, I agree with you, Peter.
No.
Go on then, let me ask you about Scuderia Ferrari, because it was a game of two halves from them this weekend, right? Poor and woeful in qualifying, and then a massive resurgence in the race. Like, Lewis Hamilton comes through, looks like the Sir Lewis Hamilton of old. Like, what is going on at Scuderia Ferrari, Peter? I can't make head nor tail of it.
Well, you say the race. I mean, we're only talking about the back end of the race, really, aren't we? I mean, Lewis wasn't exactly excelling himself in the early phase of the race when he was unable to pass Kimi Antonelli, both on hard tyres. So let's not get too excited about it. Yeah, it's a bit of a worry, isn't it? When Lewis can go that well in the last 10 laps and be that relatively quick relative to the opposition. I mean, early on, the race pace was quite slow as well. And if you look at the midfield, guys like Leclerc and Lewis were not far away from the times Max was doing on free road. But you know, it's a worry when, if you're a team principal, it's a big worry if the driver suddenly starts producing lap times and consistency that was never there in qualifying. Because, as I say, it's not that complicated. And the reality is Ferrari were just completely in a tangle in qualifying and went backwards with the setup of the car. And then when the adrenaline came in, the drivers started to get on top of things and could smell a bit of a result. Well, Lewis anyway. And we saw what happened. And that's with inconsistencies like that are more worrying than just being off the pace throughout the weekend, really, because then you think, well, what is going on? This is bizarre. Is it the drivers? Is it us? What is it? And you've got to, these days, you've got two superstar drivers. You have to say, well, those guys obviously are faultless and they're obviously getting the best from the car at any given moment. And then the engineers go down this blind alley of, well, what was it about the setup of the car right at the end of the race with a track surface like this and the temperature and the fuel load and the grip level? Why was the car suddenly good like that, but not good? And then they talk to the drivers, well, what was the difference? And Lewis will say, well, you know, I had a bit more turn in and the brakes were a bit better. You know? And they go around in circles then because there's no consistency to it. I mean, at least with Max, if the car's slow, he's slow. And if the car's good, he's quick. End of story. I've always said, you know, all you want is a driver who's on the limit the whole time. And I think Charles, I mean, the big surprise for me was how Charles was, I mean, he obviously, you know, he was just quicker than Lewis, but he was irascible and making mistakes as ever and didn't really put in one of the Charles Leclerc laps that we've always come to expect in the last couple of tenths of Q2. And we saw his astonishment of not getting into Q3. I don't know whether it was that or that Carlos Sainz had blown them both away. You know, it was P1 at the end of Q2. I mean, that was a momentous millisecond, I think, for Formula One. Talk about, you know, a snapshot of irony. And I don't know. I would say Ferrari are more confused now as a result of what happened at Imola than they were before they went to the race. I don't think that'll necessarily hurt them going into Monaco because Monaco is so different and they've got half a chance with Lewis and Charles just driving the laps of getting a good qualifying position, maybe second row, maybe even on the pole, who knows, but probably second row, I would think, for one of them. And they might get a good result, but I don't think we should read too much into that. That's just Monaco. And Imola, for them, will have been very confusing.
It's crazy, Peter. And I feel like they're playing false seeming games. As far as Frederic Vasseur, he's papering over the cracks and pretending like all things are well and good at Scuderia Ferrari. Meanwhile, Charles Leclerc is like, you can see it in his countenance, Peter. He's devastated. Like he's...
Of course he is. And he's quite right to be. I mean,
gosh.
Is Freddie Vasseur doing that? Because I don't know, how can he possibly paper over these cracks? Because if you wanted to really focus on Freddie Vasseur, one, he failed to secure Adrian Newey. Two, he approved the sacking of Carlos Sainz and the replacing of Lewis Hamilton. And three, the team is rubbish this year, basically. And so, you know, there's two big things that, as a team principal, he could have done. He could have got Adrian and he could have kept Carlos Sainz. And he didn't do either. So, okay, we went with his options. But so far, it ain't working. So no wonder Charles is tearing his hair out right now.
Really, really
and,
devastating.
And more so because he's looking at Carlos Sainz down in the Williams. Williams, for Pete's sake. You know, that's how he would be thinking. Blowing them away. That's what he would be thinking. And if that wasn't happening, he wouldn't be quite as irate, obviously. But he's quite right to be irate because it shouldn't be happening. It should not be happening at Ferrari. And I was one of the first to say, well, you know, I kind of go along with what Fred's doing there and not hiring Adrian, doesn't want to upset everybody. And he thinks he's got quite a good technical team anyway. And he personally is going to get involved as well with some of the engineering decisions. And I thought, well, that's good. You know, ART, let's bring back ART, Nico Rosberg, Lewis Hamilton, you know, all those great wins. But it's not happening. I don't know what it is, but it's just not happening. I mean, I'm amazed that Freddie's out there signing autographs and smiling. He should be, you know, behind a dark windowed office all the time, you know, just thinking of ways to improve the car. That's, I was shocked to see him doing that, to be honest, out there, signing autographs and doing stuff. And so, the question will become, I think, much heavier as the year progresses, heavier on Fred's shoulders, of why he didn't secure the services of Adrian Newey. So imagine if Adrian was at Ferrari now and he'd joined there last November or something.
Believable.
Even if the car was as it is right now, everyone would be together, tight, looking forward to the future. Everything would be positive. At the moment, it's headless chicken stuff.
It's false seeming, Peter, really, really bad. And I feel bad for both Lewis and Charles Leclerc. But some of the comments from Charles, let me ask you this question, Peter, because I was wondering this as I heard Charles Leclerc moan and complain. The quote that went around the world from Charles Leclerc post-quali is, "We are P nowhere." Is there lap time in that, Peter, do you think? Or will that do more to demotivate the team than it will motivate them?
Well, I mean, it's not Charles' job to motivate the team. If he's failed to get out of Q2 at Imola in a Ferrari, they are nowhere, and he's quite right to say it. He should be throwing his helmet down in disgust in the pit lane. And that's quite correct. It's not his job to motivate the team. It's Freddie Vasseur's job to be saying, look, of course the drivers are annoyed. Don't worry about them. This is what we're doing. This is the game plan. Blah, blah, blah. Stay motivated, guys. Move on. This is brilliant. Whatever he's going to say to them. But that doesn't seem to be happening either, does it? I mean, the team should not be dominated by a driver being annoyed because he didn't get into Q3. Of course he's going to be annoyed. I mean, if any mechanic thinks a driver's going to be happy, then he shouldn't be working in Formula One anyway.
Yeah. It's a good shout, Peter. Go on, talk to me about the Charles Leclerc, Alex Albon controversy. What do you make of that? Obviously, there's new rules as far as the overtake. Charles Leclerc was none too pleased with the eventuality and said, listen, is that the way we're racing now? Like, that's not... like, what are we doing here? Is this F1 snowflake or is this F1 proper, Peter? What do you reckon?
Well, I'm as confused as Charles Leclerc, to be honest, because I never thought the rules were any good in the first place. And now they've changed them, so I'm even more confused. I don't know what you can do and what you can't. You can obviously do what Yuki Tsunoda did and run into Carlos Sainz and get away with it. So if you can do that, where do you draw the line on what you can and can't do? I'm totally confused. And I can't answer the question because I think the whole thing's ridiculous. Get rid of all these stupid sporting regulations and let them race.
Touche.
In my opinion, and get rid of DRS while you're doing it.
Chapeau. Something else apparently.
Another race where DRS played absolutely no role at all yesterday. We might as well not have had it on the cars.
Yeah. We'll touch on DRS shortly, Peter. But speaking of getting rid of things, Imola won't be on the calendar after 2025 if word on the F1 curb is to be believed. What do you make of that, Peter? Step in the right direction, more street circuits? Surely we need more of those, right? True or false?
I don't know. Imola's a spooky place. I've never felt as warm about Imola as I have felt about Monza. Just walking around the towns and the whole thing, the Monza Park and the Fossati Hotel and everything that comes with Monza. I've never had that same vibe for Imola. So, and I don't know. They describe it as old school. I'm not quite sure what that's supposed to mean, other than the fact that it's quite narrow and it's quite difficult. And if you go off, you hit something. So I don't want to say it's good to have a circuit where you can hit things, because I felt quite clammy palmed on Saturday when we had those incidents. And it was at Imola, of course, and we all know the history of Imola. And so if it's off the calendar, I guess I'm getting around to saying it won't worry me too much, to be honest. I like it. I love Italy and I love Imola, but I don't know. Go to Mugello. Isn't it a better circuit anyway, isn't it?
Fair. Peter,
I love Mugello.
I would have bet a lot of money that you would have said that it's a travesty that we're losing Imola, particularly on the back of the Grand Prix that we saw this weekend, and it was proper and it was Tosa and it is...
Well, yeah, but Max can drive that race at other circuits. Don't worry about that. That wasn't Imola specific. And so long as we got Monza, if you were saying Monza's off the calendar, then I'd be really upset. But Imola, I don't know. For me, It was Jim Clark winning there in 63, obviously, and then Nicky winning again in 79 in the non-championship race. Carlos Reutemann finishing second that year in the 79, telling Colin that the 79 was pretty good, but didn't handle quite as well as the Esprit Turbo he'd driven on the road to the track that morning. And then, of course, I've got those terrible memories of Gilles and Peroni in 82, and then more terrible memories from Senna in 94. And yeah, there's some quick places there still, as we saw, guys like Colapinto and, that lot. What did we think about Colapinto, by the way? I mean, replacing Jack Doohan, because obviously they think he's a much better driver. and A, he had the big shunt. B, he wasn't quick. And C, much worse than all of that, if I may say so, is what he was doing to Alonso on Friday, going into the first chicane. I think it was the first chicane. And Alonso's going quite quickly on a fast lap. And he comes up behind Colapinto, who's going slowly in the middle of the road, not making it clear on which side it should be passed. And Alonso has to brake like crazy down to the gearbox of the Alpine. And immediately a thing comes up, graphic, impeding, blah, blah, blah. And 2 laps later, no further action. I couldn't believe it. To me, that's one of the most dangerous things you can do in Formula One, short of Lance Stroll taking Fernando off on the main straight in Austin a few years ago. This is horrendous. To be going slowly in the middle of the road on a straight is the worst thing you can be doing. Get to one side or the other. That's not impeding. That's causing an accident. Yeah. And I don't know how he got away with that. It's as if nobody remembers what happened at Zolder in 82 with Gilles.
Wow. That's
exactly what killed Gilles Villeneuve, as the car in front, very slowly, not making it clear on which side it should be passed. Gilles eventually having to take a gamble and move to the right. And at the last minute, the guy moved to the right and launched him. It's the worst thing you can do. And I'm shocked that he got away with that.
Peter, my old mate, Mr. Windsor, once upon a time said that if you fail to learn from history, then you're doomed to repeat its mistakes. And I feel like you were quite poignant in your post-qualifying review where you said, listen, we've had enough of those crashes. We don't want any more. This is San Marino, Imola, Emilia Romagna now. And I just feel like the FIA are, just because nothing has happened, it's almost like there's a presumption that there will never, ever be another incident. I feel like we're 2008 waiting on collateralized debt obligations and subprime crises. Oh no, everything will be all right. And I don't think they're being as proactive and continuously improving the pieces maybe they ought to.
Yeah, and I think you're right. It's, and just going back to the Colapinto thing. I mean, it's one thing when a driver doesn't see another and maybe chops across him in a corner. Or in the case of Saudi Arabia, if he's going the wrong speed through a fast section of road on the left or the right. But that's not the same as being on the straight in the middle of the road going slowly. That is absolutely wrong, and they should have clamped down on that. And there was another thing as well, and I think there was the right decision here. But remember also, I think it was on the Friday, when Lewis was going quite slowly and Isaac Hadjar was going faster, but still on a slow lap. And Hadjar could see in his mirrors that there was somebody else quite quick catching him at the top of the Variante Alta. And he went past Lewis and then braked to let the other guy go through quite quickly. And Lewis then got on the radio and said, he's just brake tested me. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And that's how Lewis saw that bit of his world. This guy had just passed him and then braked. And I think that's quite interesting because here's Lewis Hamilton, 7-time world champion, who didn't have a view of the entire situation, which was Hadjar trying to get out of the way of this quicker car as well, and assuming that Lewis knew that that was happening. Yeah. Now, whether we're still in a situation where the mirrors are rubbish, which is probably the case, I think that's still the case. And I still don't understand why we don't have rearward cameras for the drivers in the cars instead of the mirrors. And we've talked about that a lot, and I don't know, it's obviously never going to happen because we got the technology. We had the technology 5 years ago, didn't we, for that? Or whether it's Ferrari not on the case. I said Mercedes, Ferrari not on the case and telling Lewis what's going on. And if they're going to rely on GPS for this, they've got to be looking at a bigger situation now because there are so many slow cars out there on relatively short circuits.
I agree.
Practice. But to me, that was an eye-opener, that that Lewis immediately accused him of brake testing. And to their credit, the stewards obviously then thought, no, that wasn't. We saw what Hajar was doing.
Yeah.
That just shows how things can get tangled up.
It's a crazy sport. Anything.
Well, it is. And because of that, guys like Colapinto need to think about staying left or right if they're on the straight going slowly and not being in the middle of the road. And it's not up to the team to say that. That's just part of being a racing driver. Everybody knows that. Well, they should know that.
He's just got to be a bit more diligent about his racecraft, right? A bit more cognizant of his spatial awareness. Because again, another first race and another couple of crashes. It's like, well, frankly,
absolutely. And then we had that Bortoleto thing, didn't we? Where was that, in Miami? Was it that he moved over on Alonso? I think.
Yeah.
Just didn't. He didn't see him there. Why isn't he aware of it? He should be aware with his peripheral vision, even if he's not seeing it. You're just aware of these things. It comes down to the Jackie Stewart thing of all your feel you need to be drained of emotion so that everything is heightened in terms of what's going on around you and feeling what's going on around you.
Very well said, Mr. Windsor. Let me ask you very quickly about the controversy around Maximilian Verstappen and this NLS Nordschleife Nürburgring record. The rumour and speculation is that Maximilian Verstappen jumped in a 296 Ferrari and broke the NLS Nordschleife lap record, a 7:48 if I recall correctly, to which all of the Nordschleife specialists said, bull feathers, that you've got to be running the car light, that must have been DTM, BOP. There's no way that Max Verstappen, notwithstanding his tens of thousands of miles on the sim around the Nordschleife Nürburgring, there's no way that even Max Verstappen, somebody as good as him, could jump in a car in real life and smashed the lap record on his second lap, unless he were running a car with excessive power and too light. What do you make of this, Peter? Do you think Max Verstappen could have broken the lap record, or is this just myth, os, and legend?
No, I think he could have, and I don't see how anybody from their position, based on what we were saying earlier about how Oscar Piastri had no idea that Max was going to do that at the first corner, and this is Oscar Piastri, the guy on the pole. How can anybody judging Max from the outside, from the world of GT3 or DTM or whatever it is, or sims, make any judgment of how quickly Max could drive around the ring? And it wouldn't surprise me at all if he did that. Not at all. There are places where he would be managing the weight of the car and creating straight exits where those guys probably never even thought of. And as a result of that, he's probably picking up revs. Yeah, maybe he's got a little bit more in the car. Why wouldn't he? You put as much in the car as you can with brakes and power. And is that important? Why is that significant? I don't understand. I think it's really great that he did it. I'm surprised he hasn't done it before. I'm surprised he hasn't been out there once a week for the last 10 years of his life going around the ring, to be honest. That's what I would do if I was him. But anyway, that's just me. But yeah, good that he did it. And all of us. If you're going to do anything, you'd put on the best bits on the car you possibly could, wouldn't you, or not?
I suppose.
Brakes,
I
power,
think
steering.
I think the thing is, if it's an official NLS Nordschleife Nürburg lap record, then it's got to be done under the NLS balance of. Why do they have to be official? It's rubbish. Just go out and do the time. Does he care if it's official or not? He just wants to go and drive around the Nürburgring. Everybody takes life so bureaucratically these days. Who cares? Just let him pay his 10 Deutschmarks and do his lap. Or, get on with it. What's the problem? He wants to drive a quick car around the Nürburgring. He's a racing driver. All the other Nordschleife specialists were none too pleased with the insinuation.
Well, all these guys should learn that it's not the Nordschleife. Of course, it is the Nordschleife. But anybody with any sort of functioning cerebral cortex knows that you just call it the ring. That's what everybody always called it, the ring. It was never called the Nordschleife in the days of the Nürburgring when it was a proper racetrack. Yeah. And so, all these people with their bits and bobs, forget it. Max is a racer, unlike a lot of people out there. I think that's the problem.
Yeah, he's a proper racing driver, isn't he, Peter? Go on then. Fast forward to Monaco in a couple of days' time. Given what we know about Red Bull and their upgrades, McLaren in the hands of Lando and Oscar Piastri going through a little bit of a confidence crisis, maybe. The complex of the Drivers' Championship changing. If you were to save a dying puppy, Peter, who are you picking to win the Monaco Grand Prix this year?
Well, I don't know. It's a very, very good question. I can't. I mean, McLaren have the car to take the pole and win the race, absolutely for sure. I think Lando will be very good around Monaco. He's always been good on street circuits. Poe, particularly, he was good, wasn't he? And obviously Miami. So I think Lando will be very, very good at Monaco. Whether he'll make a mistake on a Friday or Saturday morning that'll, upset his rhythm is a big question mark. Oscar will be slightly wider approaches, slightly leaving a little bit more margin there for, I think, not wanting to touch anything. It'll probably put in a sort of good Jody Scheckter type drive relative to a Gilles Villeneuve, just keeping it on the island nicely. Whereas Max will be in there doing his short corners, going into Casino Square, going into Saint-Devote, going into the swimming pool, going into Rascasse. There's four key places where Max, as a driver, will be doing a better job than Lando and Oscar for sure. And if he gets a free lap, I would say Max will be on the pole. And if he's on the pole, he should win the race easily. Even though they got this stupid, was it 2 pit stops or something now?
Oh, yeah.
Artificial 2 pit stop thing.
That's
So
correct.
there's all that. Yeah, it is an oh no thing because it puts too much pressure, as I said before, on the mechanics because the pit lane at Monaco is the worst working environment of the year. It's the narrowest, most congested, most confused pit lane of the season. And here we are asking these mechanics to do these 2.3, 1.9 second pit stops. And they'll probably all be coming in at roughly the same time as well. And that's not a good, clever move at all, I think. But if you have no interest in Formula One, but you're running Liberty Media, whatever you're doing, and you want a great TV show with lots of ratings, and you don't care about Formula One, you'd love to see a few incidents, I guess, in the pit lane, cars leaving with 3 wheels on them, and the leader dropping from first to ninth because of some messed up pit stop caused by somebody else. That's what they love because that's probably quite good for the ratings. Me, I can't stand things like that. I think if you're on the pole and you're leading the race, you deserve to win it at Monaco. Similar end of story. I think George Russell will obviously be spectacular to watch. He'll be incredibly hairy, I guess is the old traditional word, into casino, all the places I just mentioned, particularly into the pool. And I'm intrigued and slightly worried about how Kimi Antonelli is going to go on those quick corners, particularly into the pool section, because I just don't think, I think he's a bit out of his depth on quick corners still. And that is a super quick corner, even though it's Monte Carlo. He'll be brilliant, I think, around Rascasse. He'll love the Rascasse section and he'd be okay into Saint-Devote, but I think at the top of the hill, he'll be struggling to be near George as well. And that's the problem, I think, at Mercedes, because we saw at Imola that he is trying to emulate what George is doing on the quick corners and it's not working for him. And he's right on the edge. And I feel sorry is the wrong word, but I fear a little bit for him on those quick corners because he needs to drive the way he wants to drive the car, with all 4 wheels on the road. And if it means just backing off a little bit, but getting a good rotation, do it. Even if his minimum speed is going to be slower than George's, do it. And I hope Mercedes have the nous to go in that direction with Kimi because, as I say, I'm slightly concerned about how he will be at Monaco on the quick corners. Who else? I think, Lewis and Charles will be good around there for sure. And I say the Ferrari could well surprise and be quite a quick car around Monaco. I say that only because that's the way motor racing sometimes is. The car's not very good anywhere else. Take it to Monaco and it actually works. So let's see. It is all about traction and it's all about, it's about traction and good brakes. That's what you need at Monaco. But they've all got that, really, I would imagine. I think McLaren's probably got the best traction. So in theory, put it this way, if Max is in a McLaren, he might as well not even go to the race because he'll be all over at Monaco, particularly. Most circuits too.
Yeah, I don't disagree, Mr. Windsor. Interestingly, the bookies have Oscar Piastri as the current betting favourite. I suppose bearing in mind that he was the only one to push Charles Leclerc around the equivalent fixture last year, right? Oscar was good last year, and maybe he can put Lando in his place yet again. I don't know.
Well, the bookmakers really shocking us by extending their necks even further and going for a complete outsider. Oh, no, this guy's leading the world championship. Let's put him. I mean, don't talk to me about bookmakers. Cameron. I've got no respect for them whatsoever. I mean, what does that mean? Of course, Oscar Piastri will be quick around Monaco, and he's going to be in a very, very good car. He'll have a good team, and he'll be quick. There's no doubt about it. He could be on the pole. If he's lucky, he'll be on the pole. If he gets a free lap, and Max is balked badly, then he'll be on the pole, and he could win the race from there. Obviously, same with Lando. Pressure's off Lando a little bit, I think, around Monaco, because it is all about traffic. He doesn't have to worry too much about all the other stuff. He knows he'll be quick there because he's a quick driver around street circuits. So Lando knows if he gets a free lap, he'll be more or less there.
Yeah. Blimey, Mr. Windsor, I can't wait. What a time to be an F1 fan, eh? It's techier than techie things always, and I'm keen. I'm keen to see how the driver championship is going to play out. Hopefully, Max Verstappen can keep keeping the boys and girls over in that papaya-coloured car honest between now and the end of the season. Mr. Windsor, as always, you've been an absolute legend. Super generous of your time, as always. If you are, as I am, in love with Mr. D. Windsor's insights, God-tier insights, as always, purple sectors, then subscribe to Peter Windsor's YouTube channel now, forthwith. Do yourself a favour. If you're not subscribed already, genuine, non-rhetorical question, what are you doing with your life? Shortly thereafter, get over to your favourite podcasting platform. Follow 5 stars, the Short Corners podcast. You will be doing yourself a favour, I promise you. If you're watching this on the YouTubes, like, comment, subscribe and share. If you're listening to this on your favourite podcasting platform, 5 stars and follow. Between now and next time, Mr. Peter D. Windsor, you're a legend. Thank you again, as always, for the time. Between now and next time, remember to look, but never stare.
Thanks, Cameron.